Cops in Greece raided a university campus ostensibly to catch a drug dealer and destroyed everything. What is this? They have to kick down every door? I mean, if you could kick down every door, wouldn't you? If you want to kick down doors, be a firefighter. Firefighters love kicking down doors. That's their favorite thing in the world. And best of all, they're morally justified in doing it, okay? They run around with an axe, you know. You know they're excited when a building's on fire because they're like, do you think we'll get to kick that? And they run up there like fucking puppy dogs and they launch themselves at those doors. They love it. Firefighters are angels. And the role they serve, you know, is certainly a good one. They tend to be a lot better than cops. There are definitely some you know, they're still they still like an overwhelmingly like macho profession, which means you're going to get a lot of guys with the kind of political dispositions that tends to slant people towards. But they're certainly better than cops. You know, far certainly better than cops. Of course, historically, firefighters have been pretty bad, actually. You know, so you all know about the what was it, Nero? Was it Cassius? Who was the richest man in Rome? What was his name again? Was it Cassius? Crassus? I think I'm thinking of Crassus. Crassus, yeah. The good old firefighting days, right? Yeah, Cassius from Julius Caesar, yeah. Crassus was the rich dude. Oh, he was very rich. He was he was a wealthy dude, actually. Yeah, exactly. STL, you've always got the memes on hand. The first ever Roman fire brigade was created by Crassus. He took advantage of the fact that Rome had no fire department by creating his own brigade, which rushed to burning buildings at the first cry of alarm. Upon arriving at the scene, however, the firefighters did nothing, while Crassus offered to buy the burning building from the distressed property owner at a miserable price. If the owner agreed to sell the property, his men would put out the fire. If the owner refused, they would simply let the structure burn to the ground. After buying many properties this way, he rebuilt them and often leased the properties to the original owners or new tenants. He was actually the like basically the most evil man. And he was also unimaginably wealthy. Um sort of like the spirit of capitalism, more so than Stooge in my humble opinion. Far more so. Um the famous Roman politician Marcus Crassus was thought to be among the Republic's wealthiest with a net worth of 200 million sesterces. Sesterces? Sesterces. He's often called the richest man in Rome. In today's money? Let's find out. Roman sestercus in USD. Somewhere between 50 cents and $2 maybe. Um so probably in the ballpark of like a third of a billion or something maybe, according to Google. It's a lot of money back then. A lot of money in general. He was died by having gold poured down his throat. Is that real or is that like a fake story? It's a legend. Governorship and death. Yeah, I think it's just a myth. Cassius's men, being near mutiny, demanded he parley with the Parthians, who had offered to meet with him. Crassus, despondent at the death of his son Publius in the battle, finally agreed to meet the Parthian general Serena. However, when Crassus mounted a horse to ride to the Parthian camp for a peace negotiation, his junior officer Octavius suspected a Parthian trap and grabbed Crassus' horses by the bridle, instigating a sudden fight with the Parthians that left the Roman party dead, including Crassus. A story later emerged to the effect that after Crassus' death, the Parthians pulled molten gold into his mouth in symbolic mockery for his thirst of wealth. Um, it's also been documented that the severed head of Crassus was used as a prop in the Parthian adaptation of the Euripidis play the Bacchae. Okay, so they didn't pull gold down his throat, but they did cut off his head and use it in a Parthian adaptation of a Roman play. So he got Hamleted. You know, that's also pretty dramatic. Shit was so metal back before the libs, true. Also, according to Plutarch, a final mockery was made ridiculing the memory of Crassus by dressing up a Roman prisoner, Caius Passianus, who resembled him in appearance, in women's clothing, calling him Crassus an imperator, and leading him in a spectacular show of a final mock triumphal procession, putting to ridiculous use the traditional symbols of Roman triumph and authority. Holy shit, dude! These Parthians were so vindictive. Like, they fucking kill their rich general, and then they're like, they find a guy, a prisoner who looks like him, and they're like, here, put on this dress. And then they like make fun of the faffy Romans by like, hey, yeah, do your Roman dance, bro. And then like the prisoner just sort of stands there and they start throwing rocks at him and he's like, ha, 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 ha. And they're like throwing like flower petals at him and they're like, ha, 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 Romans. Ha! Go, white boy, go. fucking fucking Parthians, man. Yeah, we used to be a real country. We used to be a real Western civilization. Oh, God. Though I suppose the Romans probably wouldn't appreciate lumping the Parthians in with Western civilization. Where the fuck the Parthians even from? I don't fucking know ancient history. Major Iranian political and cultural power center. Holy shit! We got cucked by the fucking Persians. Oh my God. This was like pre-Persia, wasn't it? Was it post-pre-Persia? I don't fucking know. Post-Persia? Post-Persia. Okay, gotcha. Isn't like the history of Persia just cucking Mediterranean Westerners? That's cool. Better Mansa Musa was so rich his presence destabilized Egypt's economy and a visit. Yeah, yeah, he was like the richest dude in history or whatever, I heard. I don't know how true that is, but yeah. Thoughts on 300? 300's pretty gay. Yeah. Pretty complicated stuff. If anyone wants to appreciate, I guess, like Roman. So the problem is, and like I'm not qualified to have this conversation because I'm not literally a genius with a PhD in the subject. However, one of the issues that we have when we think of the Romans is that we think of them as being representative of this kind of purity of form because all the architecture that we have left over from their shit is just like the marble stuff. Like, the temporary structures didn't last, of course. So we just look at all this and it's like, oh, they were so trad, they were so Western, they were so based, they were so white-pilled. But in reality, they were all gay Mexicans. Um, they were all gay Mexicans. They were all homos. They were all Biden screaming, faggot! They were all that. That's the whole, that's what they all were that, you know? The Romans were mega multicultural. They had to be. They were literally an empire. Um, yeah. Yeah, and all this stuff was painted. Roman architecture painted. They were all gay Mexicans. They didn't just like wander around these giant like marble like look, because for hundreds of years, archaeologists have found chemical residue on old Roman statues and architecture, which indicates that dyes or paints were used. And do you know what they did with that information? They buried it. They either ignored it or actively suppressed the dissemination of that info. Because the idea that because we already had an affinity for like neoclassical architecture, right? The purity of form. Like look at the way like Rome is depicted in paintings, right? If you think of the way we idealize ancient Rome, they're meant to be like the precursor to the West. Like the history of the Roman Empire in popular culture has been the history of white Westerners pointing towards it and saying, that's us. That was us. We like that. Those are our ancestors, you know, which is culturally and anthropologically indefensible, of course. But like that's always what we've done with it. You know, we've always thought of it in that fashion. Um, And yeah, like stuff like this, I guess. Like oh god, so zoomed in. We've always pointed at them and gone, okay, wait, this is like a fantasy thing or something. I don't fucking know. But look at the architecture, right? Like it wouldn't have been like this. It's all gay fiestas over there. The Romans were super gay. They loved being gay. They were big homo. They were mega homo. Okay. You know, like looking at this and concluding that Rome must have been like austere and disciplined and regal and reserved and pure of form would be like looking at the skeleton of a drag queen and assuming they must have been so in life, you know? It'd be like looking at like David Bowie's skeleton and going like, oh, so this person must have been austere, disciplined, pure of form, you know, very colorless. It's stupid, right? But like white supremacists have always wanted to find in Rome a kind of common ancestry because fascism is always about this like kitsch obsession with legacy, right? Fascism has to like point towards some ancestry. So they've always hated the idea that, you know, Roman architecture and statues and stuff would have looked like gay Mexicans, you know? Gay Mexican bullshit. Like stuff like this, right? Like they hate this. They despise this. But this is what the archaeological records show. Like we know there were paints used on these, and we know what kinds of paints were available at the time. Like they love. How many fascist Twitter accounts do you see with like the statue, the Roman marble statue? Don't they love it? They love it, don't they? Purity of form, the essential, the flawless idealization. No, gay Mexican. Look at this. That's what it was really like. We know the paints were there. They hate this. Look at this. If you gave this to an average person and you were like, "Hey, which culture produced this?" They would probably shoot themselves. They wouldn't think Roman. Nobody would think Roman because everyone associates Roman with the pure white marble form. Oh, they hate the fact that we also know for a fact that they were often not portrayed as white, too. They hate it. They hate this. They hate this. They can't stand this. Look at this. Give this to a white supremacist. This is your Rome. This is the legacy of your people. This is Western antiquity. How do you feel? And they kill themselves right there. They shoot themselves in the mouth. To be fair, I hate it too. Look! I also like the pure idealization of the Roman marble form or whatever, but that culture, the culture of neoclassicism, of marble statues with no paint, of towering pillars, you know, that's not Roman culture. That's our culture. That's not classicism. It's neoclassicism. If you like neoclassicism, like the White House. The White House is literally a neoclassicist building. The founding fathers and a lot of people during that time loved building stuff in like the image of the greats, you know? Our philosophers, our architects, our painters, they loved sort of hearkening back to that, you know? And don't get me wrong, I like neoclassicist architecture, like neoclassicist architecture. But the problem is the neoclassical architects were operating under the assumption that they were like reclaiming the legacy of Rome in form, but they weren't. It was a lie. This isn't the legacy of Rome. It's our sort of colonial projection of ourselves onto them. They would have looked at us and thought we were fucking weird. They would not have seen us as like their, you know, they would have, you know, they would have not vibed with our interpretation of their culture. Yeah, plus Roman bathrooms didn't have walls. No, they probably did. It depends. It's complicated. Classicism is already looking back to Greek and Roman art plus architecture. Yeah, I mean, it depends on what era you're like sort of calling back to, right? But this is what I mean. Like, look at this, okay? This right here from Wikipedia. The Fountain of the Four Rivers, okay? How do you think this would have looked back at the time? Oh, sorry. This was done in the Renaissance period, or like maybe a bit before it. I don't know. It was done in the Middle Ages, okay? I'm not an art historian. So this would have been done by fancy pants Europeans trying to model their creations off the works of the Romans. But don't you see? They're not modeling their creations off the works of the Romans. They're simply reinterpreting their projected understanding of the Romans through their art. And now we look at this and think, ah, the Roman classics. But this was no more Roman than the stuff we make today. It's like you can't jump in the same river twice. Every time you create something, even if it's a recreation, you are still adding something to it. You are still building on top of it. It is impossible to construct something, even as a replication, without adding to it your own biases and preconceptions. So they did it, we do it, but man, it sure does fucking make people angry when you point out, dude, anthropologists have gotten death threats from white supremacist groups over publishing findings on Roman statues being painted. Because this is like a serious blow to the aesthetic root of modern fascism, right? This right here is like a death blow to modern fascism. It is. You understand why, don't you? Why do you think all those fascist Twitter accounts have those like marble statue bios? Like it must mean something to them. There's something conceptually essential to the form as depicted. Do you think a fascist would be as likely to have a Twitter bio of Julius Caesar as he probably actually did look after being painted? Because he looks like he looks like a diva. He looks like a homosexual. Yeah, absolutely fabulous. They don't like this at all. Just not to their preference. Though I hate it too. But I also don't have any weird, like, fascist conceptions. Here's another reason why they really, 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 really like it when the sculptures are just white, okay? Here's a painting of what a sculpture depicts. Do you see the problem? You see the problem, don't you? Roman ethnic, right? It's plausibly deniable here. It's not here. He was literally modeled with curved facial hair. Not exactly a common Western Aryan phenotype. But here, trad Roman, austere, pure. Oh, when did the Roman Empire get woke? Oh, I thought I had my earbuds on. Funnily enough, the brain damage that we've kind of collectively experienced as a product of our sort of white supremacist misinterpretation of Roman antiquity, it's become so popular that now, like overwhelmingly, the trend is to not paint statues. Think about it. You've gone to a museum, haven't you? Statues, even ones that aren't attempting some kind of classicist revival, don't have paint on them. Overwhelmingly. At least in my experiences looking at Western art in museums, and I've gone to a fair number of museums, sculptures tend to be just the material, right? But you have seen painted statues before, haven't you? You're just more likely to have seen them in other museum exhibits. We were so committed to the aesthetic of the pure marble form that the entirety of Western artistic construction gravitated towards an imitation of a non-existent historical trend. The entire civilization, if it can be called that, of the West, and I don't think there's one Western civilization, but you know what I mean, has been dragged in a direction based off of like historicism, effectively, like a sort of mishistoricism. You understand what I'm talking about, right? Well, yeah, you know, hopefully it's hopefully it's of value to someone. I've been to a decent number of museums, and overwhelmingly, it seems the case that like Western countries tend to just have the form itself. Um, but I think I've seen a decent number of painted statuettes in like Southeast Asian exhibits and stuff like that. Um, I guess an example would be like if you looked at this and I told you that it was Taiwanese, you would believe me, right? Because it is. But this isn't the kind of thing you would ever see in the West, right? Like not just, obviously there are different like sort of cultural and aesthetic things being pulled on here, but like in addition to that, this is considered really fucking gaudy for the West. I like it personally. I'm defending it here, you know. I like it. But this is considered like quite gaudy for our standards, you know. Typically, statues that are meant to be placed outside are more likely to not have paint on them because, of course, paint wears. Especially the paint they had available back in the time of the Romans. Like, you know, it's far more likely to kind of fall apart. But if they're kept in exhibits or private collections or just in wealthy people's homes, you know, the paint would last longer. Of course, eventually it did fade. After all, I mean, we found them after they'd faded. Quite like these. Okay, point made. Oh, did I say Taiwanese instead of Thai? I apologize. Thai. They're not Taiwanese. They're from Thailand, as in Thai. I fuck that up all the time. Along with like 70 other things that I fuck up constantly. No, that's Thailand, not Taiwan. Sorry. Um Vaush, quite the opposite. The paint protects the statue from eroding, marble being the exception here. Well, in the Romans' case, they would have sculpted it out of marble, right? Um, I think that really depends. It also depends on the type of paint. I don't think the paint they would have used like 1,000 years ago would have done much to protect the stone underneath. They did not have like the sealants that we had access to. Also, like they couldn't apply what's that term? What's the thing you put on over the paint? Um, the no, primer's before. No, primer's before. It's called primer. Uh, the sealant, the varnish. Thank you. Yeah. The varnish. Um, yeah. Because back in those days, varnish was made with biological materials that would discolor in UV, which is in sunlight, which is outside. So, yeah. Romans were pedos, Vosh. Their culture glorified it. True. Unfortunately, most, not all, but most ancient, even pre-modern cultures would have been considered pretty overtly pedophilic by our standards. Yeah, I don't know how many exceptions you're going to find to that. Like, keep in mind, the value of consent, like as a concept, is a fairly new thing. Marital rape was legal in the US until a couple decades ago. Like, it's that new, you know? Um, the whole problem with like the predation of children is a consent issue, obviously. And I really don't think if you go back 2,000 years, they give a shit about consent, you know, like that much. So, um, yeah. Consent came about in the Victorian era. That's partially true, but there were issues. It was a common Victorian misconception that in order for a woman to get pregnant, she would need to have an orgasm too. And on one hand, this would mean that husbands would try to like get their wives into it and not just like rape, like baby rape them. Because so if they, you know, so like they would come and they would have a child. But the problem is, it also meant that if a woman was raped and got pregnant from it, then it wasn't rape, right? Because she came. Like that's their logic. That's so yeah. So yeah, you know. Weird question. Do you think pedophilia is natural with how many old cultures? Rape is natural in the sense that humans naturally gravitate towards it. The question as to whether or not something is natural is kind of irrelevant. Like we were bludgeoning each other over the head for like arguments over food. Like the natural question is to sort of implicitly invoke the naturalistic fallacy, which is to suggest that if something is natural, it must be defensible, which is of course not the case. Um, you know, Roman emperor slash empress Elagabalus was believed to be considered trans now. Really? I'm not reading all that. Why would you link me all this text? Oh my god. I'll just look for a statue or something, sculpture. Um. Oh yeah, 100%. 100%. Are you fucking kidding me? Absolutely. Boy motor. My alarms are going off. 0% chance. Yeah. Clocked from orbit. She died at 18. Oh, well, that's also Probably a classic move. Takes one to know one. I'm a man motor, not a boy motor. Reader personal history. Nope. Romans had transsexual statues as well. Romans would be cool if not for all the slavery, conquering, massacres, and forced blood sports. We have transsexual statues too. Did you know you can go on like e-hentai or whatever and type in like big dick Fuda porn? Like, look, the West is accepting of trans people. There's women with penises there.